Maggie always has this little do do do. It's like little tone that she always has to like sing to herself when she's manipulating all the technology out there. So it's kind of
So glad everyone can start their video with that right now. So that's awesome.
so glad to be here today in our Facebook group for Financially Fearless Women. We are growing, which is really exciting. As many know, and Steph, you're in Fem City as well. So we're partnering with Fem City, and we've had some great interactions with them, a couple of lives. So that's been really fun. So if you're out there from Fem City, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And thanks to Violet for that very powerful and engaging relationship. She's amazing. And then also Leadership Global is another one of our great partners that we're partnering with. And we are their financial arm. So we present to them on a monthly basis as well. But today we are presenting in our own Facebook group. And as you know, Purse Strings is here every Thursday at noon Central. And we bring to you our own Purse Strings approved professionals to provide you great information, knowledge, and skill on all things financial. And this month, we actually are focusing on a topic of widows. And some people might say, wow, that's not a very uplifting topic. And what we say at Purse Strings is if we're not talking about money, we're not learning about money. And money comes into play in lots of situations. And widows is a very, very, very important one. And I say, Steph, that, the baby boomer era is that whole bulk of the baby boomers, they're aging. And the men and the women are aging. And so I think in life, we're going to find that men statistically will die first. And we could come into a many, many widows coming our way. What do you think about that?
It's so true that statistically, most of us women will be on our own financially at some point in our lives. I mean, I have a client who was widowed at 39, right? It really, as we know, can happen at any age. So, I mean, women are going to take over the world.
Right. And I think, at Purse Strings, we want to get in front of that, right? We want to make sure women are always prepared and they're not, deer in the headlights should something like this happen, but that they are always prepared for the unexpected. That's why we say emergency funds, right? That's why we say wills, power of attorneys, all these very important documents. But today, on that note, we're bringing you Stephanie McCullough, who's going to talk about, women going solo for whether widowed or just going solo because they're solo. So we're so glad to have you today, Stephanie. You're one of our very popular speakers. And great to have you.
Thank you. I love being here.
Yeah.
Maggie, it's always a good time.
How are we doing? Is everyone getting logged on out there?
Yeah, it looks like everyone's getting on. It looks like they're coming in to watch. So we'll just wait another minute or two just to get everyone to get online.
Yeah. And Maggie, how can they pop in and say hello? Just in the Facebook?
Yeah, they should in the comments. We have Mary Beth here saying hello, ladies.
Yeah.
Not all of them can pop through, but Linda's on from Oregon, which is awesome.
We love Linda.
Linda's great. But yeah, a lot of people don't think we should talk about widows until, or want to talk about their widow, which really, I think we're bringing this forward because we want people to be proactive rather than reactive. So you can have options.
Yeah.
Always the key word are options. And so that's why we really wanted to talk about it this month is because nobody wants to talk about their spouse dying, but we want to make sure women and men, anybody has all the options they can have when they're left alone and allowed to grieve and have money.
Yeah, and that's it. Giving people this space. I mean, when you have your plan in place, should something happen, it's okay. You don't have to worry about the finances because you've done the work, you've met with your financial planners and your attorneys and whomever else you need on your financial team, you have your plan in place. And then you can just spend the time, working through the issue, grieving, whatever it might be that you need to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Maggie, you mentioned options, and I think about it too as autonomy, right? Whatever we're faced with, we want to be able to make our own decisions and decide for ourselves instead of be at someone else's mercy.
Yeah.
So if we can not compound the grief with a financial disaster at the same time, right? So much the better. And that takes forward planning.
Right. And, you know, for any of us who've experienced someone in our family who's died, and if you're in that kind of role of working through all the things that you need to do and all the people you need to meet with and all the documents you need to make sure are in place, and, you know, compounding that, like you said, with a financial disaster, you can't even think straight, right? And I've heard a stat that says it takes a good year to really get through the grieving process when somebody dies. I mean, to really feel like you're back on your feet somewhat. I mean, you're getting into your new normal, as they say. But you don't you if you have your financials in place, that's, you know, a big part of it. They can let you kind of rest easy and really work through the grieving process.
I agree. You don't want to be forced to make a decision, right? You want to wait and see how you're feeling and what you want your life to be like.
Yeah.
Now that you're, it's not going as you planned, but you're still there. So you
Right.
want to be able to make your own decisions.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, I'm just going to give a little intro to Stephanie, and then we'll just let you get started because there's all this great information we'll talk about for days.
Yeah.
So Stephanie McCullough is the founder of Sophia Financial. They believe if more women were financially secure and exercised their economic power, the world would be a better place. Agreed. So they help their clients build confidence, resilience, and joy in their lives. It's not always just about the money. So she'll work with you to create a safe space, a very personal conversation, because we know money touches most parts of our lives, and help you make goals and financial decisions with align with your values, in harmony with your situation and your life, and understanding what jobs your money needs to do for you. Mm-hmm. So that is Sophia Financial. And so Stephanie, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Barb kind of mentioned it at the beginning that most of women, statistically, at some point in our lives, we're going to be on our own in terms of making the money decisions. And yet, when you're part of a couple, it's very natural for there to be a division of labor. My husband takes care of the lawn and the plants outside. I want nothing to do with that. I mostly take care of feeding us. And because I'm the financial planner, I mostly take care of the money. But in a traditional or in a heterosexual relationship, more often than not, the long-term financial stuff, the investing especially, is usually the man's role, whether or not they're good at it, right? There's a lot of proof that women are actually better investors than men, but that's a topic for a different day. So the issue becomes, if the husband has traditionally taken care of paying the bills and doing the investments and figuring out all that stuff, and now he's gone for whatever reason, right? But especially if he's passed away, now all of a sudden the widow has to step into taking care of all that stuff. And it's so difficult. I've seen it again and again, especially if we're talking about, perhaps older women from a more kind of traditional generation where that really wasn't thought of as a woman's domain, and having to step into it at a time when you're grieving and there's so much emotional upheaval and uncertainty really is difficult. So what I would encourage everyone to do, even if you've got that division of labor, is talk about it. Talk about what assets you've got, what the cash flows are, where the banks are. I mean, I've heard of stories of widows who don't even know where they bank, or what credit card, how to pay the credit card bills and that kind of stuff. So you kind of want to be prepared for contingencies, should either of you have to step into the other's roles. Maybe it's all laid out in a binder, or, maybe there's a document online. I used LastPass, which is one of those online password things. So all the passwords for the various financial places and everything else is in there. And I've shared that with my husband. I'm not sure he's ever logged on, but, should he need to get in there and do stuff, it's there, right? Hopefully he's able to find that. Any kind of, pre-conversation documentation that you can turn to is certainly going to stand you in good stead. One thing I want to say, though, is that I've been doing this work as a financial planner for 24 years. And even, living as a woman for years before that, 30 years before that, most women find the topic of money and finances anxiety provoking. So if this stuff makes you anxious, you're not alone. Obviously, that's what Purse Strings is all about, right? Being financially fearless. But what I love to share is the science that proves that actually all human beings are bad at money. It's called behavioral finance. You can Google it. There's been Nobel Prizes in economics actually awarded to psychologists, proving that human beings are wired to make bad money decisions. So when I share that to groups of women, I can literally see people kind of go, oh, it's not my fault. It's not a character flaw that I bounced that check last year, or that I tend to spend too much at Nordstrom or the wine store in my case, or on shoes, or whatever it might be, right? It's actually how we're wired. So I share that to try to take away some of the shame and blame that we tend to pile up on ourselves, right? I think, again, there's research showing that women tend to be a little bit more perfectionist about this stuff than men do. We tend to kind of doubt our abilities. And even where there are questionnaires about finances and investing, and before people take the test, they say, how do you think you're going to do? And the women say, I don't think I'm going to score very well. And then they actually score higher than the men. So the men have higher confidence and lower knowledge. Women have lower confidence around money. So how do we address this, right? How do we deal with this situation? I think step zero, I always say, on any financial planning is to really do some self-examination, tune in with some self-knowledge, check in with your mindset. I think one of the things we need to do is put away the self-judgment around money. We're going to try to leave that behind. And if you're in the position of having to step into the financial role, try to come into it with a little bit of a scientist's mind or an explorer, right? Kind of that beginner's mind. You're going to want to learn things. You're going to have to be doing new things. And I'm going to tell you, there's going to be emotions involved, right? Money is emotional. There's no way around that. Stepping into this role where we maybe feel like we're not as qualified as we should be, it's emotional. Here's the thing, is to try to get a little perspective. Notice those emotions, right? Take note of how you feel when you open the bank statements or when you log on to the credit card. What are those feelings that come up? And maybe take some time to journal about it, to try to look at it with some level of objectivity. If you've got a dear friend or a therapist or counselor to talk to about those things, I think the idea is to bring them to light, because we don't want those emotions to stop us. We want them to share whatever information they're giving us, right? I heard once that there's this thing called the think, feel, act cycle. So actually feelings don't come up first. There are thoughts behind them. There are thoughts that happen first that lead to those emotions. So when we're feeling anxious or, self-judgmental about our account balances or whatever it might be, there are thoughts underneath that. And they could be very deep-seated. It could be from way back, things you were told as a child, how your parents handled money growing up. All of that is tied into our emotions around money. And the fascinating thing is that, two siblings growing up in the same household with the same parents in the same situation can take very different lessons about money away from that. So it's not always that you can do a one-to-one causation, but starting to look at, okay, why do I get so nervous when I have to take on this role? Or I'll tell you a story. My one client named Jane, who is a widow, she was not a widow when she first became my client. And then sadly, her husband passed away soon after we started working together. And she's been a client of mine for years now. And maybe sometime before the pandemic, because I was in her kitchen, we were talking. And I probably was there for close to 2 hours. We were having a great time talking about all kinds of stuff. And at the end, she said to me, I'm just so exhausted. This talking about money makes me so upset and anxious. And I thought to myself, I think we talked about money for about 15 minutes. And then we talked about her trip to Spain and her sons and her jewelry making and all this other stuff. I'm like, but right, I don't dismiss the reality that that money stuff makes her so anxious. So I think the key is some self-knowledge, right? Does this stuff stress you out? And now you're in a position where you have to take it on your own. In that case, it might make sense to partner up with someone, to find somebody you can trust to help you with it. It could be a friend, a girlfriend, a neighbor, a family member, maybe a financial coach, financial planner, bookkeeper, accountant, therapist, whomever it might be. More important than their profession and then any designations are some key criteria that I would suggest. Number one, you want someone who is empathetic, who is compassionate, non-judgmental. They're there to support you, to walk through this with you, right? Any financial decisions you might have to make. They're not there to shame you. They're not there to tell you what to do. You need to find someone, in my opinion, that you can feel comfortable getting financially naked with, meaning sharing the numbers, sharing, the actual statements and the dollars and cents. It is very true that going from being part of a couple to being on your own, whether from widowhood, whether from divorce or other situations, there is often an adverse dollars and cents impact, right? Maybe there were two incomes in the household and now there's only one. Maybe the now deceased was the breadwinner and you're having to look at, do I need to go back to work? Or do I need to ramp up my income? Do I need to adjust my standard of living? Am I going to have to move? Can I afford my current lifestyle? Those are very emotional, very personal decisions. And hopefully you're in a position where you don't have to decide right away, right? The advice is always that you don't want to make big, drastic, irreversible decisions in a time of crisis. But I think having this objective person, caring, compassionate person to help you think it through, to kind of be your thinking partner, decision-making partner, right? Somebody to bring some objectivity to it. And also to help you prioritize, right? There's probably going to be quite a list of tasks and decisions you have to make, but not all of them have to happen right away. So helping you prioritize that. I'm going to put out there that probably you don't want to be leaning on a product salesperson or a banker, someone who's got an ulterior motive or has a kind of a conflict of interest. And that might mean that if you're turning to a financial professional or another professional, that you're paying for their time and expertise. And I think that's okay. If you go to the makeup counter and they're offering you the free makeover, they're really trying to sell you the $75 mascara. Perhaps paying a makeup consultant, then they're getting paid for their time and expertise. So they don't have that vested interest in trying to sell you something that maybe you don't need. So just that little thought. You're really looking for someone to be your cheerleader as well, to help you go through and see your progress. I have another client who she actually was engaged and her fiance passed away. Oh, it was awful. When we first met, we met in the Whole Foods and she was crying at the table. And we met a couple of years later and she was still stressed out about things. And I had to say to her, Gail, do you realize how far you've come? How much progress you have made? And she kind of had to stop and step back and be like, oh yeah, I was kind of a wreck when we first got together, wasn't I? And look what I have done since then. So that's what you're looking for. And chances are someone along the way is going to offer you some perhaps unsolicited advice, right? Or they're going to say, oh, you absolutely have to talk to my financial advisor, or my brother-in-law is the best, or, I did this and you should do the same thing. Well-meaning perhaps, but they're coming at it from their perspective, not your perspective. And I think it's perfectly okay. You might want to think about your kind of standard line ahead of time to say something like, thank you so much for your suggestions, for your concern. I really appreciate your caring about me. At this point, I'm in the stage of just gathering information and I'm not really ready to make big decisions, right? I'm adjusting to this new reality. When I am ready, I'll certainly consider what you've said. Thank you, right? To kind of try to maybe shut it down. It is a big transition, right? You're going forward now as an individual woman as opposed to a part of a partnership. And that's jarring, and there's grief. And perhaps, there's a little bit of freedom there as well. I've seen women go through that, right? It takes a while often to start to see it as, oh, now I get to decide. I never really cared about this big house. I always kind of wanted to live over here. Maybe now I can do it. Of course, there are other things involved, family, maybe kids. It's not always you. But I want to emphasize that your priority in your financial decision making going forward should be your well-being, your financial well-being. It is not selfish. As women, I believe that we are socialized to care about others before ourselves, to take care of everyone else, and not to focus on ourselves. I definitely came up with that belief that it is selfish to focus on myself. And I'm pushing back on that strongly with you today. If there are other people in your life that you feel that you need to care for, remember that your financial stability, your financial resilience and sustainability is a gift to them. The fact that you are able to stand on your own 2 feet and take care of yourself and not become dependent or reliant, that is a gift to them. Even if it might mean that you're prioritizing your own savings and building of assets before paying for kids' college or helping other family members. If you are in a caregiving role, perhaps for a sibling or a parent or an aunt or an uncle, it is perfectly okay to ask to be paid, especially if that person has some money. Again, that's not selfish. That is looking out for your own stability and well-being. And if you do it legally, right, and pay taxes on it, it helps your Social Security benefit when you get to that age. I want to encourage you to think about your own possibility that you might need care in the future. Because now that you're single, there's not a default caregiver in the home, right? Very often one spouse falls ill or starts to need help with day-to-day activities. The other spouse is there to help out. That's not the case for women living on their own. So think about that ahead of time. What would you want? What kind of situation would you want to be in? I have heard about this kind of new trend of older women living together, having roommates or groups of women in kind of co-living situations. My book club always jokes that we're going to ditch the husbands and move in together when we get older. But, thinking about a retirement community, perhaps, where there are other people around, where there are layers of care available, it can be jarring because perhaps you don't think of yourself as that age yet, or you think it is, the last chapter, the decline, but it can be a good decision. What I would suggest is keep everything on the table. Think about your goals, your values, your priorities, what you really, want to feel on a day-to-day basis. Start there and, let that lead your decisions. It can be difficult to distance ourselves from perhaps the values that those in our lives have had, and get back to really what is important to me. Perhaps working with a coach, or again just a really good friend, and going through some exercises can be very helpful. I was just reading again The Gifts of Imperfection book by Brene Brown, which is really wonderful. That has some nice kind of thoughts and exercises on kind of getting in touch with yourself. But there's tons of other ways to kind of get that centeredness. The other thing I suggest to people, and especially a woman on her own, and especially if she's newly on her own, is to spend a little bit of time thinking about your relationship with money. We talked a little bit about, does money make you anxious? But there are a lot of other kind of money beliefs that we pick up along the way, right? Financial views. Bringing those to light can be very helpful in maybe noticing patterns of our behavior and where they come from, and bringing more mindfulness and intentionality to how we use our money. It's really fascinating, right? People's attitudes about money vary widely, and they can change throughout our lives, but very often they do. They go back to childhood or early messages. I've talked to clients who were influenced by an uncle, for example, or, their experience in their first job and that's struggling to pay the rent or whatever it might be, right? Where did your beliefs, those thoughts in the think, feel, act cycle, where did they come from? What are they? Sometimes they're buried so deep we're not really conscious of them. There's a lot of messages out there in the media about women and money, right? How have those impacted you and how you look at these things? So I think, bringing it to light again, bringing it a little bit more to being mindful can be very helpful. I'll just share a story for myself that I realized a few years ago. My mother, I think, was very focused on what others thought and, kind of keeping up, right? So I remember, I think it must have been middle school, and we were doing some back to school shopping. I had maybe outgrown some of my clothes. She was asking, she didn't ask what clothes I wanted. She said, what are the other kids wearing? And I think that lodged itself deep in my brain so that I'm often comparing myself to what others have, right? That's just a little insight for me. So when I'm going to make a financial decision, I can take a pause and be like, okay, wait a minute. Is this really kind of what I want? Or is that little voice in my head saying, oh, you got to make sure that you look at least as nice as everyone else in the room? Is that where it came from? So that's just an example of kind of bringing that to mind. My last point is that everybody is individual. Everybody has a different experience, a different, kind of set of things that's going to help them through. So Dr. Barb at the beginning mentioned this kind of rule of thumb, really, that, it's best not to make big financial decisions for at least a year because you're going to be grieving and going through that. But I have a client who was widowed at 39. And when I talked to her about that, she said, no, that's not me. She was a partner at a very high-powered law firm. She was a doer. So to her, the best way to work through the stress and the grief of the new situation was to tick things off the list. She wanted to make those decisions and get them done and get them, lined up. That was the right answer for her. So you need to give yourself the time, the compassion, the space to try to figure out what's the right answer for you. And I'll also say that the things you decide now don't have to be the answer for the rest of your life. I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves thinking, oh, if I decide I want to stay in this house, that means I have to stay in this house forever. Or if I decide I want to move to Arizona, that's my last move ever. No, the best decisions are those that we can change and adjust going forward. So just because, your cousin or your neighbor, did it a certain way doesn't mean that that's the way for you. I would encourage you to find some support. There are several groups out there. The Modern Widows Club is very active online. In my area, Philadelphia, I know there's a very strong chapter of the Transition Network, which is a women's group kind of focused on women in all kinds of transition in life, but it tends to be, women skewing a little bit older. If you've got local women's groups, lean on your friends. Maybe there's alumni, church, community. If you can find others who are going through what you're going through, it really does help to, take away that feeling of being alone. And then I really encourage everybody, but especially widows or women who are all of a sudden on their own, find that money buddy, someone you can talk to openly about your money goals, your money situation, right? Ideally, it's a co-equal relationship in the money buddy situation where you could be accountability partners for each other. Maybe there's things you want to learn together, and hold each other accountable. Hey, Sally, you said you were saving up for that thing, or remember you weren't going to buy the fancy car, you were going to get a used Toyota. Oh, right. Whatever it might be, right? Don't dismiss any options because of what you think other people might think of you, right? You are a smart, capable woman. You have come this far in your life. You could totally do this. The financial stuff, it's not rocket science. No one taught us about money along the way. And as I mentioned, we're wired as human beings to be bad at it. So give yourself some compassion and grace, but you can do this. And I would say, you gather the information that you can, you make the best decisions you can. Nothing's ever foolproof. Nothing's ever guaranteed. We make guesses. I always say that financial planning is guessing. We're guessing about the future. And as things go forward, every year that passes is another year we know what happened. And then we adjust the plan. We recalibrate our guesses. And, we treat ourselves with kindness and compassion. Try to speak to yourself as you would your dearest friend who is in a very fragile state, because that's who you're talking to. Thank you so much. Thank you to Purse Strings. I'm thrilled to have been here. I would love to chat. Any questions anybody might have?
Stephanie, that was wonderful. You hit on some wonderful points. If anyone has questions, please pop them into the chat. We have Linda on here as well, who's saying, loves your points as well. And a money buddy is a great idea. It's hard finding people that you can be that financially naked with. I was trying to think of who I would want to talk to about it. Cause I know my friends have their own money beliefs and limiting beliefs, or I know you're touching on that, maybe beliefs you don't even know that you have. But yeah, I was trying to think who would I really want to be my money buddy? That's a hard one.
It is a hard one because it's still a big taboo to talk about the money stuff, right? We don't know people's numbers. We know maybe what brand of car they drive or how big their house is or what they wear to work or out to play, but we don't know what's in their bank account or their credit card balance or their retirement accounts. So getting comfortable, finding someone you can talk to openly about that, right? I've got a couple friends, but not all of my friends group do we talk that openly. But I think it's very valuable when you can really feel comfortable, because otherwise, because nobody teaches us about money and we're wired to be bad at it, we just circle around in our own heads and how the heck do we make decisions, right? It's really stressful and difficult.
100%, definitely. And I think it's when you share with others of what you're purchasing, you're really expressing your values. So then if you don't feel comfortable expressing that, it's okay, then I'm buying something that I'm not aligned with. It's a whole thing like you were diving into. So it's amazing how all those different levels come out throughout, even when you're just grab a simple money buddy.
Yeah. So much of financial advice, it's like, fitness advice, right? It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy to do. It's not complicated, but it's not easy.
Exactly. And along with that is everybody's different, which I really like how you really hounded on that. Just like fitness, not keto doesn't work for everybody, or, gluten-free doesn't work for everyone, whatever you may be doing. Even if you're all in the same workout class, you might even be doing something a little unique to that item as well, just because you're different, which I think is really important. And you do need to be, not take everyone's advice, take it all with your own brain.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention, which I think I forgot, which is, when you're going through this, if you were newly in a single state, don't push yourself too much, right? Try to take on one little bit at a time, right? Like my client Jane, she could only handle about 15 minutes of money talk, short bursts of working on this stuff. And then, kind of document where you are and go off and do something else, right? I think that's a good way to do it too. Don't feel I know for me, if the project feels enormous, I'm much more likely to push it off, and it builds up in my head. And then sometimes when I start, I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. But if you say I'm only going to tackle 15 minutes a day of whatever it might be, sometimes that can help too. So you don't get as emotionally exhausted.
By the end of a week, you'll see progress. You'll have a ton of things checked off your list, a couple phone calls made, have people almost working for you in the background to figure things out, which is awesome. So it's not like it needs to be thousands of hours. We're not hitting 10,000 hours. We're just hitting a couple hours to just stay on track.
Totally.
Right,
and if you've got friends saying, what can I do to help you? Maybe try to think of a list of things hey, you can call the cable company and ask them how I change the, to my name.
Right.
Right? Give them something to do.
ask for, you move your date around so you can pay your bills all, the way you want them aligned. They don't care. You just have to call and ask, or get those bank refunds. They'll give them back to you as long as you're not calling every month. So you just got to take action.
Yes. Yes.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I think the thing that is important to me is taking the time that you need and not making any quick decisions right out of the gate. I think people don't even realize that they're in shock when they're in shock, no matter what. So being patient with yourself. And like you say, as women, we need to be able to give ourselves some grace and some time and some space. But I always say, like with purse strings, have your financial team in order, because when you can't think something through clearly, that's when you go to your team and say, these are my concerns, or I'm up at night, I'm always worried about this or that, the other thing. Who's that person you can reach out to and say, do I have enough, right? Don't you get that question all the time?
Yeah, all the
If
time.
I don't, what adjustments do I need to make? And I think just it gives you peace of mind, that you have a financial professional there that can help you. I think that's really super important too.
I agree. And it does need to be someone you trust and someone is not, out to try to sell you something for their own benefit, right? Like they really have your best interest at heart. And unfortunately, there's no shortcut way to know that from the name on the door or designations behind their name. You really just got to talk to people and figure out who you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and I've hosted so many focus groups with women, and some of the stories I've heard were, we always say the good, the bad, the ugly. One woman who was fairly wealthy with her husband, and they had sold a company, and her husband had some dementia, so everything fell on her. While she wasn't a widow, she was suddenly in charge of all things financial, and she admittedly just said, I put a lot of money in my savings account and just let it sit there because I didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. And, of course, that probably kills a financial professional because they're not really earning money on it. But if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do until she found the right person that she could trust and make the right decisions.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is a very sexist comment, but cash is king. I have no problem with cash.
It is king. Yeah. And then I have other women who, were not really financially aware of what to do next and got an insurance check and did not invest it in a way that was a long-term investment. And before you knew it, it was gone.
Yeah.
So, these are just mistakes people make when they're grieving or they're unsure, or they don't know, or they don't have the right financial team.
Well, and it's difficult because it might seem like a giant lump sum of money, and it kind of is a large lump sum. But if you try to stretch that out into a lifetime of income, our brains are not good at doing that math.
Yeah.
And I've met women who said, oh, I can't do what you do. I'm not good at math. I was like, I got a calculator. I got a computer. Like, I don't do the math in my head.
Right.
We're really not good at doing that. So, yeah, sometimes you do have to, get some outside professional expertise.
On the other side of the coin, I remember I was in a conference with Tom Hegna, who you probably know, and he said his son came to him and said, my friend's father died and his mom got an inheritance check and she was wondering what to do with it. So he did go see her, and it was like $1 million or something. And she said, oh, I got this $1 million check, and, I think I'm going to buy that lake house, for the family. And he said, you need to get a job, because he said that $1 million, you have 3 young boys that you need to get through school, through college. It might seem like you've gotten a windfall right now, but really to use this money wisely and really plan accordingly. It doesn't mean, you might have $100 check in your hand today, but when you look over your years, how is that really going to serve you best? And it's just, I thought that was such a great story because it's not a windfall. It's about serving up what you need for the rest of your life and what your family needs for the rest of your life. So again, having the right financial professional giving you great advice.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, so many people say, oh, when I get more money, then I can hire a financial planner. I'll talk to someone for 90 minutes, right? Like, it doesn't, you don't need millions of dollars to get good financial advice.
Another good point. So many people say, well, I don't really have that much money. Well, it's all about getting started. It's about getting started.
And a lot of financial advisors are paid on how much money you invest with them, but others are paid hourly.
Yeah.
So you can just get hourly advice when you need it.
Yeah. So all great advice. We could talk about this for a long, long time, but we just want everyone to know that Purse Strings is here to provide you these free tools and resources. We curate a great list of top tier financial professionals who know the female market, can serve the female market. And Stephanie McCullough is one of our top female professionals who'd be happy to help and talk with you if you find yourself in the situation and need to really think it through or talk it through. So glad you're here today, Stephanie.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, Maggie, you're on mute.
We can't hear Maggie. She's having some technical difficulties.
Oh,
You there now?
Yeah, just to top it off, this is Stephanie McCullough. She is founder of Sophia Financial, so you can always reach her at stephanie@sophiafinancial.com. She's also all over social media. Are you Sophia Financial on Instagram?
I am.
Awesome. And then she's also one of our Purse Strings approved professionals, so you can always check her out on our website, pursestrings.co. And so, like we talked about earlier, this whole month, our theme is widows. So come, let's get prepared for a fun future, just in case we all want to have the best life and options. Yeah, thank you again, Stephanie, and we'll see everyone again next week. Bye.
Very good.
Thank you, Stephanie. Bye, everyone.